Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa la udwana illa ala al-zalimin. Wa al-aqibatu lil-muttaqeen. Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barik ala abdika wa rasulika Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. So I apologize that we were a little late. We were a little behind on lunch. Inshallah ta'ala, I will try my best not to take too much from Sister Hala's time as well. It's very valuable information, inshallah, on more on the practical side. This is, however, my favorite part of the class, because now we kind of see how the transition takes place from the generation of the Sahaba to the generation of the Tabi'een. And really, there's just a very famous story that illustrates that, and I'm going to paraphrase the story, but it's a beautiful story that shows us how that righteousness, that salah, translates from, or transitions from the time of the companions and is passed down to the time of the Tabi'een and to throughout the first three generations of Islam. And this is the famous story of Omar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, as he's traveling one night, as he's on one of his night patrols. Omar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu is walking with his son Aslam. And he and his son Aslam, as they're going through the streets and providing for people and checking up on the ummah, they come across a house and they hear a conversation take place. And the conversation is a mother and a daughter, between a mother and a daughter. And the mother is telling the daughter to water the milk, to put more water into the milk so that they can have more quantity. And obviously, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he prohibited that, which was to put more water into the milk, because then people would go and sell it in the marketplace, just like when you buy perfumed and it smells good for 3 seconds, right, because of the amount of water in it. Likewise with milk, there was a practice to put water into the milk and then sell it that way. So Umar radiallahu anhu prohibited this, and the mother and the daughter are talking, and the mother is saying, put some more water into the milk so you can make it more. And the daughter responds to the mother while Umar is listening, not knowing that Umar is listening. The mother says, "Wa ayna Umar? Where is Umar right now anyway?" SubhanAllah, look, little does she know that Umar is outside of her house listening to this conversation. "Wa ayna Umar? Where is Umar now?" And the daughter responds by saying, "Ya ummi, ma kuntu li uti'uhu fil alan wa ukhalifuhu fil sir." Oh my mother, I'm not going to obey him in public and then disobey him in private. In kana Umaru la yarana fa ilahu Umar yarana. If Umar does not see us, the Lord of Umar sees us right now. And that's enough for me. SubhanAllah, this amount of taqwa and this amount of just purity as she responds to her mother. So when that takes place, that incident takes place, Umar ibn al-Khattab was very impressed by the daughter. So Umar tells Aslam, remember this house, mark in front of the house so that you'll remember this house. Now, he didn't mark in front of the house so that he could come back and torture the mother and say, you thought I wasn't listening, I heard what you said and you tried to break the law and I know what you were doing and I was spying on you. No. Umar that night gathers his children together and he asks his sons, which one amongst you is not married? So Asim was the only one. Asim radiallahu anhu said, I'm not married yet. So Umar ibn al-Khattab said, okay. So he told Aslam, he said, go find out about this family. So he went and he asked about the family, and it turns out that the mother was a widow and it was just her and her daughter alone in the house, and they were going through some very tough financial difficulty. So Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he finds out that Asim is not, or when he finds out that the girl is single, she's available, the next day Umar takes his son Asim to propose on behalf of him to this young girl. And subhanAllah, from that day, as these two became married, Asim and this young woman became married, they had a daughter named Layla, and Layla had a son named Umar ibn Abdul Aziz rahimahullah ta'ala. So subhanAllah, you see the transition, the way that this righteousness carries over. The righteousness of this young woman, this woman who believes in justice and who's a principled woman, and now she's getting married to the son of a man who restored justice to the world. And Umar ibn al-Khattab had a dream about Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, that someone from my descendants will restore justice to this world after it has been filled with injustice. You see this righteousness transition. And by the way, the mother of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, Layla bint Asim, the mother of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, who's the daughter of this daughter and the granddaughter of Umar ibn al-Khattab, married Abdul Aziz ibn Marwan, who was a governor, who was an authority, who was a rich man, who was the brother of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who was a very powerful man in the ummah. And you have all these conversations of Layla warning Abdul Aziz ibn Marwan to be just. Al-Adl, do not wrong people. You know, she opposed Hajjaj. We mentioned Hajjaj the tyrant. Hajjaj was hired under Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. She opposed him right away. You know, and then she had a daughter, the older sister of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, whose name was al-Baneen. And al-Baneen, you know, opposed Al-Hajjaj and had arguments with Hajjaj publicly. This is the type of household that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz grew up in. Right? So it shows you the effect of the women of his household on him, and how, again, this righteousness was passed down from generation to generation. Now I'm going to share with you some of the biggest names that we know in our history, especially from the Tabi'een. In Iraq in particular, okay, you had two very famous men, Imam Hassan al-Basri and Imam Muhammad ibn Sirin. These were the two greatest scholars from the Tabi'een in Iraq. Both of them are from families of freed slaves. Okay, both of them. And in fact, both of them were born into slavery before they were freed, and they became the greatest scholars of the ummah. Which shows you again, you know, how Islam established that justice and that equality, and how they weren't looked down upon, nor were they treated any differently after they were freed from slavery. Now, Imam Hassan al-Basri says about Muhammad ibn Sirin, he says that he's the most righteous of the Tabi'een. He's the greatest of the Tabi'een. He studied with multiple companions, that he's the most righteous of the Tabi'een. Ibn Sirin says Hassan al-Basri is the greatest of the Tabi'een. Allahu A'lam, okay? But they were the two greatest scholars in the Tabi'een. The mother of Ibn Sirin, and this is very significant, the mother of Ibn Sirin is Safiya. Her name is Safiya. Safiya bint what? We don't know. We just know Safiya, because she was a freed slave by Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Abu Bakr freed her. She was enslaved so early on in her life that she did not even know who her parents were. SubhanAllah. And after Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu freed her, you know what she did? She became a student of Abu Bakr. And it's very rare to find students of Abu Bakr. Right? There are very few scholars in history that were students of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, because of, you know, Abu Bakr only lived for you know, a short while after the Prophet ﷺ, and obviously he was very busy. But this woman, Safiya, was a student of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and after Abu Bakr passed away, she was a student of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha as well. And subhanAllah, she became such a prominent scholar. We're talking about the mother now. She became such a prominent scholar, no one even cared what her name was. They just knew she was Safiya. She became such a prominent scholar that Ibn Kathir says that there is no janazah in history where, you know, after the janazah of the Prophet ﷺ, where you had that many noble people attend. He said all of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ that were living attended, all of the veterans of Badr attended. Okay, so 3 wives of the Prophet ﷺ, 18 veterans of Badr, and Salatul Janazah was led by Ubay ibn Ka'b radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Ibn Kathir says there isn't a person in history after the Prophet ﷺ where you find these types of people. All of these notable people, you know, at their janazah. And it was at the janazah of this woman whose father was unknown, whose parents were unknown. And this was the mother of Muhammad ibn Sirin. But you know what? We said the title is the greatest mothers of men and women. Right? The greatest men and women of all time. And do you know that Muhammad ibn Sirin's sister, Hafsa bin Sirin, was his teacher? Was his Sheikh? Okay? Hafsa bin Sirin was more knowledgeable than Muhammad ibn Sirin. Okay? And she memorized the Quran at the age of 9 years old. She mastered all of the qira'at by the age of 12. So she was a scholar in Quran. She was a scholar of hadith. Hafsa bin Sirin is a hadith narrator. Okay? She taught 3 of her brothers. She had 3 brothers, Muhammad, Yahya, and Anas. All of them were students of Hafsa. Okay? Who was her teacher? Her mother. She narrates hadith from her mother. She learned the Quran from her mother. She taught her brothers, and she taught most of the Tabi'een. Almost every Tabi'i that lived in Iraq has something from Hafsa bin Sirin radiallahu ta'ala anha. Okay, and we also find, you know, different statements. So you find the statement of Ilyas ibn Muawiyah, who says that I have not met anyone more knowledgeable than Hafsa. And you know, it was said to him, what about Hasan al-Basri or her brother, Muhammad ibn Sirin? He said, neither of them were as knowledgeable as her. Even Hasan al-Basri, who is considered Sayyid al-Tabi'een, okay, the chief, the master of the Tabi'een. Hisham ibn Hassan, he says, I've met Hasan al-Basri, I've met Muhammad ibn Sirin, and he said, neither of them, he's actually, in one statement, he said, both of their, if you put their minds together, that equaled the mind of Hafsa bin Sirin. Her intelligence, her aql, her qiyas, the way she was able to sort through things. The brilliance of this young woman that was raised by her mother. And we also find, subhanAllah, that she used to have a masjid in her house, in the sense she had her own musalla. And she was known, subhanAllah, that for 30 years, she would stay in that musalla, praying in that musalla, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the day. And you know, she would only take her breaks to teach her students and to eat and to drink. You know, but her musalla was practically her home, and so she was recognized for her ibadah more than anything else, her worship more than anything else. One of her students, Abdul Karim ibn Muawiyah, he says that she would read half of the Quran every night in Qiyamul Layl. She would finish half of the Quran every night in Qiyamul Layl, and in Ramadan she would finish the entire Quran every night in Qiyamul Layl. That is the extent of the righteousness of this woman. And she used to fast every day except for the 2 Eids and the days of Tashriq. So she fasted every day of her life except for the 2 Eids and the days of Tashriq that followed afterwards. One of her students is her son, Hudayl. So Hudayl, he used to be seen carrying firewood to the house. And so he used to warm his mother up, and he used to sit with her over the firewood and learn hadith from her and learn Quran from her. Okay? So this just shows you, again, the creation of that generation of the Tabi'een. Now, my favorite story of the entire day, you guys are going to wonder, where does the mom come in this story? My favorite story of this entire day, because this starts a long line of single mothers now. Okay? Actually starts, we're not even going to mention the mom for a while here. I'll try to paraphrase the story because of time, but those of you that are taking notes, this incident that I'm sharing with you takes place in the year 51 after Hijrah. 51 years after Hijrah. There is a man by the name of Al-Rabi' ibn Ziyad Al-Harthi. Al-Rabi' ibn Ziyad Al-Harthi. Can you guys hear upstairs well? You hear good? Okay, alhamdulillah. Al-Rabi' ibn Ziyad Al-Harthi. Al-Rabi' ibn Ziyad Al-Harthi, he was a commander of the Muslim army, and he led the army to Khurasan and Azerbaijan. So 2 very important conquests were under Al-Rabi' ibn Ziyad Al-Harthi. Again, you're not going to hear about a mom for a while here. Alright, so Al-Rabi' was a great conqueror, he was a great general, and one of his soldiers was a young servant by the name of Farukh. Farukh, not Farouk, Farukh, okay? And Al-Rabi' used to depend upon him. He was his right-hand man. He put him in charge of the right side of the army in many different battles. And on the day that they conquered Azerbaijan, and they prayed 2 rak'ahs after conquering Azerbaijan, Al-Rabi' was so happy, he gave Farukh 30,000 dinars. Now a dinar is like a thing of gold. A dinar is serious, okay? He gave him 30,000 dinars, and he told him, you go free and go live your life now. Right? After this accomplishment of bringing Azerbaijan, just go ahead now, you can go free, and here's 30,000 dinars as well. Now 30,000 dinars, by the way, at that time, 30,000 dinars can last you for years. Okay? So this young man is so happy now, Farukh. He goes from Al-Basra to Medina. On the way from Basra to Medina, he hears the news that Al-Rabi' ibn Ziyad has passed away. He says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. This was his teacher. This was someone that he loved. So he, obviously he was hurt by that. So he went back to Basra, prayed janazah on Al-Rabi', then made his way back to Medina with his 30,000 dinars. When he gets to Medina now, he decides he wants to get married. I have 30,000 dinars, and I haven't, I've been in battle my entire life, right? I mean, he has never lived outside of battle. So he goes and he proposes to a woman, and he gets married, okay? You guys still following, right? When he gets married, a week after he gets married, he's called back to battle. He hears the call to battle. He hears the Khalifa calling out. He hears that there is battle going on with the Byzantines, with the Romans. He goes back out a week after getting married. And as he's leaving his home, subhanAllah, he felt, obviously he felt very sad. He talked to his wife, and his wife was a righteous woman. His wife encouraged him. His wife told him, just go forth, this is a noble call, do what you have to do. So she said nothing but encouraging words. And subhanAllah, as he was leaving, he looks back at his wife very, very, very sad. Right? He's looking back at her and he's very saddened that he's leaving, and she's giving him encouraging signs, and he goes out in battle with the Byzantines. Now this man, Farukh, would not come back home for 16 years. Okay? Which, by the way, Omar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, of course, wouldn't allow that long, but subhanAllah, just somehow he ends up in battle with the Byzantines for 16 years. So he comes home after 16 years. When he enters into his house, and Rasulullah ﷺ said you shouldn't enter into your house at night, right? He comes home at night. When he enters into a house, a man picks up a sword and tries to kill him. So this young man is at him, fighting with him, and he's fighting the man back, and there's this huge commotion going on, and all of the scholars of Medina now are rushing to this house in the middle of the night to stop the commotion. Imam Malik is running over there, right? All of these students at Imam Layth ibn Sa'id are running over there to stop this commotion. And then the mother comes out, the wife of Farukh. She says, stop, that's your dad. So then next thing you know, the young man puts the sword down, embraces his dad. They all have dinner together that night, and everything is good, right? SubhanAllah, this is my dad. I'm meeting him for the first time in 16 years. Okay? Imam Malik goes home. This man, Farukh, doesn't even know who Imam Malik is. He has no idea who Imam Layth ibn Sa'id. He has no idea who these ulama are. Right? So they all go home for the night. They sit that night. They talk. Right? And then that night, he goes to sleep and he's speaking to his wife. And they're catching up on everything. Obviously, the last 16 years, what's happened over the last 16 years. So in the conversation, it comes up. He says, by the way, remember when I got married, I left 30,000 dinars here? What happened to that 30,000 dinars? Just out of curiosity. So she said, go to Fajr. And after you come back from Fajr, I'll tell you what happened to the 30,000 dinars. Okay? So he goes out to Salat al-Fajr. He prays Fajr. And he notices that the same young man that was fighting him in his home is leading the salah, and everyone is sitting around him after Salat al-Fajr, and he's wearing the imamah, he's wearing this big turban on his head, and he's wearing the jubbah. So afterwards he goes up to him and he tells him, who are you? What happened? He's happy, he's proud. And he says, my name is Rabi'a. I'm your son, Rabi'a, just reaffirming. And who is Rabi'a? That was the man that Farukh used to fight for, right? His old commander. And obviously when he got married, he told his wife that this was the man that freed me. His name was Rabi'. So she named his son after that man. So he says, my name is Rabi'atul Ra'i, Rabi' ibn Abdurrahman. I'm 16 years old. I'm the imam of the masjid. Wa ana ufti fiha. And I give fatwa here. Rabi' ibn Abdurrahman is the teacher of Imam Malik. He was the mufti of Medina at the age of 16 years old. So now Farukh is on, he's so happy. He goes home and he asks his wife, or his wife rather asked him, she says, did you go to Fajr? He said, yeah. And she said, what did you see? She said, I saw our son, mashallah, he's a sheikh, he's a alim. And she's like, that's what I did with the 30,000 dinars. She said, his entire life, I took him to the best of ulama. I traveled with him to Iraq. I traveled with him to Mecca. I traveled with him to Sham. And I asked, every city that I went to, I asked, who is your greatest teacher? And I put him and I sponsored him to study. And she said, I would wait sometimes for months, sometimes for a year, for him to finish taking hadith or learning from that person. And then we came back home and he became what you see today. SubhanAllah, look at this mother now. Single mother, she did it all by herself. And she raised who? The teacher of Imam Malik, the Mufti of Medina, only 70 years after Hijrah, 70 years after the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, blessed Medina with his presence, alayhi salatu wassalam.